My misogynistic coworker drank my breast milk at work. I returned to my job as a personal trainer at Iron Apex Fitness when my son was exactly 4 months old. The fitness industry is already brutal on postpartum bodies. You are expected to look like you never carried a child, and you are expected to look like that about 8 weeks after you physically tear yourself apart to deliver one. I pushed it to 4 months because we had the savings, but by the time I walked back through those double glass doors, the pressure was immense. But the biggest obstacle wasn't the clients or the mirrors. It was our head trainer, Marcus. Marcus was a walking, breathing cartoon of gym bro toxicity. He was 6'2", walked around at a lean 240 pounds, and had an ego that took up the rest of the square footage in the room. He openly believed that female trainers only existed to sell leggings and look pretty at the front desk. He didn't even try to hide it. For years, he ran the gym like his own personal kingdom. Management let him get away with it because he pulled in the highest paying celebrity clients. If a local athlete or a B-list actor needed to bulk up for a role, they went to Marcus. Because of that, he brought in money, and because he brought in money, he was untouchable. He loved to assert his dominance through daily microaggressions. It was never just one big thing. It was a constant, grinding friction. He would intentionally interrupt my consultations to correct my clients on things I had just explained. I'd be showing a client how to properly hinge at the hips for a Romanian deadlift, and Marcus would stroll past, slap the client on the shoulder, and say, "Make sure you listen to her, but if you want to actually move weight, come see me later." If one of the female trainers brought in a video of a heavy deadlift personal record, he would stand over her phone, squint, and loudly critique her stance. Or he'd joke about the bumper plates being fake. He couldn't stand the idea of anyone, especially a woman, taking up space in what he considered his domain. But he was especially awful about food. Marcus believed he was entitled to a cut of everyone else's meal prep. He called it his alpha tax. The staff fridge at Iron Apex was a battleground. If you left a protein shake, a turkey wrap, or an energy drink in there without writing your name on it in thick black Sharpie, there was a 50% chance Marcus would eat it. Even the Sharpie didn't always stop him. I once watched him eat an entire container of leftover pad thai that belonged to the front desk girl. When she confronted him, nearly in tears because it was a 12-hour shift and that was her only meal, he just laughed. He flexed his bicep and told her his body required more fuel than hers because he was actually building real muscle. He flipped her a crumpled $5 bill and told her to go buy a protein bar. Things got significantly harder for me when I came back from maternity leave. I was chronically sleep deprived. My son was waking up every 3 hours, and I was trying to maintain my milk supply while working 8-hour shifts on the active gym floor. It is a deeply physical job. You are constantly moving, spotting, loading plates, demonstrating movements, and projecting your voice over the sound of thumping bass and clanking iron. I was burning calories at an insane rate, and my body was struggling to keep up with the demands of producing milk. Iron Apex did not have a dedicated mother's room. When I asked the manager, a spineless guy named Kyle, where I could pump, he looked at me like I had asked to slaughter a goat in the lobby. He eventually pointed me to a drafty utility closet next to the men's locker room mop sink. It was miserable. The closet smelled intensely of industrial bleach and damp cotton. The fluorescent overhead light buzzed like a dying wasp. I had to sit on an overturned plastic mop bucket, hook myself up to the mechanical pump, and stare at a shelf of toilet paper rolls for 20 minutes at a time. The walls were thin. I could hear the grunts from the free weight section and the bass from the spin studio vibrating through the concrete floor. I was constantly stressed about my supply dropping. Stress is the enemy of milk production. And being in that closet, worrying about my clients waiting on the floor, worrying about Marcus judging my absence, made my output plummet. Seeing me struggle, my husband Dave started making me these incredibly dense, calorie-heavy lactation smoothies to bring to work. Dave is an engineer, so he approached my milk supply like a structural deficit. He researched forums and bought expensive, specialized ingredients. Every morning, he blended whole milk, peanut butter, raw oats, brewer's yeast, flaxseed, and specialized oat extracts. They were thick, gritty, and tasted faintly of bread dough, but they worked. They kept my calories up and my supply steady. I relied on them. They were my lifeline to keeping my baby fed while keeping my job. On a Tuesday, about 3 weeks into my return, I hit a wall. I had just finished a grueling morning of back-to-back clients, a brutal 6 a.m. session, followed by a 7:15, an 8:30, and a 10. I had barely drank water. My breasts were aching, signaling it was time to pump. But first, I desperately needed the calories from my smoothie. I was shaking from the physical exertion and the blood sugar drop. I walked into the break room and opened the staff fridge. My opaque gray shaker bottle was gone from the middle shelf. Panic spiked in my chest. I frantically moved Tupperware containers and bags of carrots, thinking someone had just shoved it to the back. It wasn't there. I turned around. I found the empty shaker cup sitting in the stainless steel sink. The lid was off. The thick beige residue of the smoothie coated the bottom. Marcus was lounging on the cracked leather sofa in the corner of the break room. He had his feet kicked up on the coffee table, his massive thighs taking up most of the cushions. He was picking his teeth with a plastic flosser, staring at his phone. My hands started to shake. "Marcus," I said, my voice tight, "did you drink my smoothie?" He didn't even look up from his screen. "Alpha tax, Mom. That was my food," I said, stepping closer. "I need that. I'm nursing. I'm working an 8-hour shift, and that was my food." He finally looked at me, dropping the flosser onto the table. He smirked. It was a slow, lazy smirk that communicated exactly how little he respected me. "Relax. It tasted like chalk and peanut butter anyway. You should be thanking me for saving you from the extra carbs." He let his eyes drop down to my waist, lingering for a second too long. "You still have some baby weight to lose anyway. You're welcome." I couldn't speak. The sheer audacity, the cruelty of it, just short-circuited my brain. I was so exhausted, so hormonally drained, and so incredibly hungry that I didn't even yell. The tears just started hot and fast. I grabbed my empty cup from the sink, turned on my heel, and walked out the back door. I went to my Honda Civic, locked the doors, and cried for 20 minutes. It wasn't a quiet cry. It was the ugly, hyperventilating sobbing of a woman who is pushed to her absolute physical and emotional limit. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I thought about quitting. I thought about walking back in there and smashing a 10-pound dumbbell into his knee. But as the tears finally slowed and the heavy, suffocating heat of the car settled over me, the despair hardened into something else. It hardened into a very cold, very precise rage. That was the exact moment I decided to break him. I didn't want to just complain to management again. Kyle would do nothing. I didn't want to yell at Marcus. Yelling at Marcus just proved to him that you were emotional and weak. I needed to hit him where he actually lived. I needed to use his own psychology against him. Marcus was obsessed with finding the ultimate biological edge. He didn't just lift weights. He treated his body like a chemistry experiment. He was always reading obscure Eastern European bodybuilding forums and trying bizarre, unregulated supplements to push his mass. He was constantly talking about testosterone precursors, deer antler, velvet, and synthetic growth hormones. If he thought eating drywall would give him an extra quarter-inch on his biceps, he would have a plate of it for breakfast. I realized I had the perfect weapon. My body was literally producing the most nutrient-dense, growth-oriented fluid on the planet. I spent the next week casually planting seeds. I didn't approach Marcus directly. That would be too obvious. Instead, I used the environment. Whenever Marcus was within earshot, stretching near the front desk, desk, mixing his pre-workout in the break room, or logging his client's sets at the computer terminal, I would strike up a conversation with one of the other trainers. Usually, I'd pick Tyler, a younger guy who worshipped Marcus but was gullible enough to believe anything I said. I leaned against the counter one afternoon, perfectly aware that Marcus was standing 10 feet away filling his water jug. Yeah, Dave finally found a supplier for it, I told Tyler, keeping my voice hushed, like I was sharing a trade secret. It's insane. It's this underground muscle building protocol I've been researching. I'm using it to rebuild my core density postpartum, but the bodybuilders who use it are seeing crazy mass gains. What is it? Tyler asked. It's an unpasteurized mammalian growth serum, I said, letting the syllables roll out smoothly. I used words I knew would trigger Marcus's competitive read. It's packed with raw biological growth factors and living immune cells. It has a perfect weight to casein ratio. Evolution literally designed it to triple mammalian body mass in a matter of months. It bypasses the liver entirely and goes straight to muscle synthesis. I glanced over. Marcus had stopped filling his jug. The water was overflowing down the side of the plastic, splashing onto his shoes. He pretended not to listen, forcefully shutting off the tap, but I saw him hovering near the doorway. He was soaking in every word. A few days later, I complained loudly in the break room to Jess, another female trainer, about the logistics. Marcus was on the sofa again. It's just so hard to source, I sighed, opening the fridge. It has to be kept at a precise temperature. If it gets too warm, the live enzymes die. I'm only allowed to bring in a few ounces at a time from the supplier. Is it expensive? Jess asked, totally unaware of what I was actually doing. Exorbitant, I lied, but the anabolic response is undeniable. By the following Monday, the trap was set. The bait had been in the water long enough. Marcus was a predator of opportunity, and I was about to give him the perfect opportunity. My morning schedule was packed, but I had a 30-minute window at 11:30 a.m. I grabbed my pump bag and went into the mop closet. I sat on the overturned bucket, the smell of bleach filling my nose, the bass from the spin class thudding against my spine. I hooked myself up and let the machine do its work. I pumped exactly 8 ounces of fresh, warm breast milk. I didn't mix it with oats. I didn't mix it with peanut butter. I left it pure. I poured the milk into an unmarked, opaque shaker bottle. It was a dark blue bottle, meaning you couldn't see the liquid inside, but you could feel the weight of it. I walked into the empty staff kitchen. I placed the blue shaker bottle right at the front of the fridge, exactly at eye level, not hidden behind the mustard, not tucked in the crisper drawer, front and center, a shiny, unmarked target. Then, I went out to the gym floor to train my noon client, a woman named Sarah, who was working on her Bulgarian split squats. We set up at a squat rack that gave me a direct line of sight down the hallway to the break room door. Okay, Sarah, I said, handing her a pair of 20-pound dumbbells. Chest up, core tight, drop that back knee straight down. As she started her reps, I kept one eye on the hallway. At exactly 12:05 p.m., I saw Marcus strolling down the hall. He had a towel draped over his massive neck. He looked around, checking to see who was watching, and slipped into the staff kitchen. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at the clock on the wall. The second hand ticked past the 12. I waited 2 agonizing minutes. Great job, Sarah, I said, keeping my voice completely level. Take a 90-second rest. I'll be right back. I put the dumbbells down and walked across the black turf floor. My sneakers made no sound. I turned the corner and walked into the break room. Marcus was standing by the sink. His head was tilted back, the dark blue shaker bottle raised to the ceiling as he tried to get the last few drops. He swallowed audibly. He brought the bottle down, wiped his mouth with the back of his massive hand, and looked at me. There was no guilt in his eyes. There wasn't even a flicker of embarrassment at being caught red-handed stealing again. He just looked at me with pure, entitled criticism. He smacked his lips together, tasting the residue. Your secret growth serum tastes weird, he said, his voice flat. He shook the empty bottle at me. It's way too sweet. It tastes almost like melted cereal milk. You sure you didn't get scammed by your supplier? Because this tastes like garbage. I stopped in the doorway. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there, letting the silence stretch out between us. The hum of the refrigerator felt incredibly loud. I let a slow, genuine smile spread across my face. I didn't get scammed at all, Marcus, I said. My voice was calm. It felt like I was speaking from underwater. He frowned, leaning against the counter. Then why does it taste like a bowl of frosted flakes? Because it's exactly what I promised it was, I said, taking one step into the room. Unpasteurized mammalian growth serum, completely organic, full of live enzymes and antibodies. Marcus looked at the empty bottle in his hand. He looked back at me. A tiny crease formed between his eyebrows. Where the hell did you even buy this? I kept my eyes locked on his. I kept my voice perfectly steady. I didn't buy it, Marcus. I pointed toward the hallway, toward the locker rooms. I pumped it out of my own body in the mop closet 20 minutes ago. The sequence of emotions that played across his face in the next 10 seconds was the most incredible thing I have ever witnessed. I could have watched it on a loop for the rest of my life. First came the confusion. His brain simply refused to process the words. He looked at me, then down at the bottle, then back at me. Then came the mathematical realization. I saw his eyes widen as his brain connected the phrase mammalian growth serum to the fact that I was a nursing mother. He calculated exactly what he had just chugged 8 ounces of. And finally, absolute, unadulterated horror. It was like watching a building collapse from the inside out. The aggressive, alpha male posture dissolved instantly. The blood drained completely from his face, rushing away from his skin and leaving him looking pale, green, and horribly clammy under the harsh fluorescent lights. His jaw went slack. He dropped the plastic shaker bottle into the stainless steel sink. It hit the metal with a loud, hollow clatter. He pulled his hand back like the plastic was suddenly radioactive. He did not say a single word. He couldn't. He clamped both of his hands over his mouth, his eyes bulging wide with panic. He shoved past me so hard his shoulder clipped the doorframe, and he sprinted down the hallway toward the men's locker room. I didn't move. I just stood in the doorway of the break room and listened. A few seconds later, the heavy wooden door of the men's room slammed open, and then it started. I listened to Marcus violently, aggressively dry heaving into a toilet stall. It echoed down the hallway. It was loud, desperate, and relentless. He was in there for the next 10 minutes, purging every last drop of his alpha tax. I picked up the empty blue bottle from the sink, washed it out with hot water and soap, and walked back out to the floor to finish Sarah's split squats. Marcus went home sick that day. He texted Kyle and said he caught a stomach bug. He came back to work on Thursday, but he looked different. The swagger was gone. When we crossed paths near the free weights, he immediately looked down at his shoes and walked the other way. He didn't look me in the eye for the next 6 months. He never commented on my body or my baby weight again. He stopped walking over to offer unsolicited form checks to the female staff. If I was demonstrating a deadlift, he stayed on the opposite side of the turf. And most importantly, he never touched another single item in the staff fridge. Tupperware sat in there for days, completely undisturbed. He started bringing his meals in a soft cooler that he kept zip tightly inside his own locker. The alpha tax was permanently repealed. The silence from Marcus over the next few weeks was louder than the heavy metal playlist blasting from the overhead speakers. He didn't just avoid me. He actively retreated from my entire hemisphere of the gym. If I was on the green turf doing sled pushes with a client, he stayed glued to the mirrors by the heavy dumbbells. If I was at the front desk checking the schedule, he suddenly found an urgent need to reorganize the kettlebells in the back corner. In an environment entirely built on chest puffing and alpha dog posturing, a physical retreat is blood in the water. People noticed. Tyler was the first to ask about it. We were wiping down the cable machines at the end of a Tuesday shift. The smell of lemon disinfectant and stale sweat hung heavy in the air. He tossed a paper towel into the bin and looked over at Marcus, who was silently packing his gym bag across the room. "Did something happen between you and Big Man?" Tyler asked, keeping his voice low. "He usually micromanages the hell out of your afternoon block, but he hasn't said a word to you in a month. I kept scrubbing the rubber grip of the cable attachment. I didn't look up. Guess he finally realized I know how to train my own clients." "It's not just that," Tyler pressed. "He's off. He dropped a set of 80-pounders yesterday and just walked away. Didn't even rack them. And he looks, I don't know, deflated." I looked at Marcus. Tyler was right. Marcus was still massive, still built like a brick wall, but the psychological scaffolding holding that wall together had cracked. His posture had changed. The aggressive, chest-out swagger he used to occupy space had been replaced by a stiff, guarded walk. He looked like a man who had suddenly realized the floorboards were rotten and was terrified of stepping too hard. He knew what he had done, and worse, he knew that I knew. That was the invisible leash I now had around his neck. He was terrified I was going to tell someone. He was terrified I was going to tell times everyone. In the hyper-masculine, deeply insecure world of bodybuilding, drinking a female coworker's breast milk out of the staff fridge to get an anabolic edge isn't just a fireable offense. It is a legendary, career-ending humiliation. If that story got out to the other trainers, to his celebrity clients, or to the local meathead forums he frequented, he would be a laughingstock for the rest of his life. He would never live it down. I never told a soul. I didn't need to. The threat of the secret was infinitely more powerful than the secret itself. It became my shield. I finally had the mental space to focus on my own recovery. Without Marcus constantly critiquing my body or my methods, the heavy, suffocating anxiety that used to hit me in the parking lot every morning completely evaporated. I stopped hiding in the mop closet. I walked into Kyle's office, sat down in the chair across from his desk, and told him the utility closet was a health code violation. I told him if he didn't convert the unused massage therapy room into a locked, clean space for me to pump, I was going to report Iron Apex to the state labor board. Kyle blinked, stammered about the budget for exactly 4 seconds, saw the completely dead, unblinking look in my eyes, and handed me the key. My milk supply stabilized. My son thrived, and slowly, my own physical strength started to return. I started lifting heavy again, not for aesthetics, not to bounce back for the industry, but just to feel the dense, grounding weight of the iron in my hands. I started deadlifting on the main platforms, right in the center of the gym. The first time I loaded 225 pounds onto the barbell, I felt Marcus's eyes on me from across the room. Before the incident, he would have strolled over, arms crossed, and made a condescending comment about protecting my lower back. He would have tried to coach me in front of the whole room. This time, I gripped the knurling of the bar, locked my lats, and looked directly at him in the mirror. I held his gaze. Marcus looked away first. He turned his back, picked up his water jug, and walked into the locker room. I pulled the weight off the floor. It moved fast and smooth. The culture at Iron Apex began to shift, slowly but undeniably. Gyms are deeply hierarchical ecosystems. When the apex predator loses his nerve, the rest of the pack adjusts. Because Marcus stopped aggressively policing the floor, the other female trainers started claiming more space. Jess started running her heavy lifting circuits in the squat racks, instead of being banished to the Smith machines in the corner. The front desk staff stopped letting Marcus bully them out of their lunches. We didn't talk about it. Women in male-dominated industries rarely need to hold a meeting to understand a shift in power. We just feel the slack in the rope and we pull. About 8 months after the incident, Marcus's contract was up for renewal. He had lost 2 of his high-paying clients. They cited his lack of focus and weird energy in their exit emails to management. He wasn't pulling the numbers he used to. It was a rainy Thursday night in November. The gym was mostly empty. Just a few dedicated regulars grinding out late-night sets. The rain was beating against the floor-to-ceiling windows, distorting the streetlights outside. I was at the front desk, closing out the register. Marcus walked out of the back office. He was wearing a heavy gray hoodie with a hood pulled up, carrying a cardboard box full of protein powder tubs, lifting belts, and a framed picture he used to keep on his desk. He had quit, or he had been asked to leave. I didn't know, and I didn't care. He walked toward the exit, his boots heavy on the rubber matting. As he reached the double glass doors, he stopped. He stood there for a long moment, the neon open sign buzzing faintly above his head. Then, he turned around and looked at me. We were the only 2 people in the lobby. The heavy metal music was off. Only the hum of the treadmills filled the silence. He looked tired. The massive, inflated ego that used to radiate off him was gone, leaving behind a profoundly insecure, middle-aged man who had built his entire identity on dominating people weaker than him. He stared at me, his jaw working as if he wanted to say something. Maybe an apology, maybe a threat. Maybe he just wanted to ask if I was ever going to tell anyone what he did. I didn't give him the chance to speak. I didn't give him anything. I just looked at him, completely indifferent, and went back to counting the cash in the drawer. I heard the heavy glass door swing open, letting in a gust of cold, wet air. Then the door clicked shut, and he was gone. The Friday morning after Marcus left, the gym felt physically lighter. It was a subtle, atmospheric shift, like the pressure dropping before a rainstorm finally breaks. I walked in at 5:15 a.m. to prep for my first client. The heavy metallic smell of the iron was still there. The rubber mats still squeaked under my sneakers, but the sour chemical scent of his specific brand of aerosol body spray was completely gone. Kyle, our manager, was in full-blown panic mode by noon. He was pacing behind the front desk, his pale hands running through his thinning hair. Marcus hadn't just left. He had abandoned a roster of 12 premium clients. These were the local car dealership owners, the real estate developers, the guys who paid $400 an hour to be yelled at and told they were apex predators. Kyle called an emergency staff meeting in the break room. We all stood around the island, holding our shakers and thermoses. No one sat on the cracked leather sofa. "We have a massive gap in revenue," Kyle said, his voice tight. He looked at Tyler. "Tyler, I need you to take over the Anderson account. He wants to bench 300 by Christmas." Tyler looked terrified. "I don't know his programming, Kyle." Marcus kept all his logs locked in his tablet. Kyle wiped his forehead. He started looking around the room, trying to figure out how to patch the sinking ship. He skipped right over me. He looked at Jess, then back to Tyler, then to a new kid named Ben, who had been working here for 3 weeks. I set my coffee mug down on the counter. It made a sharp, flat sound against the laminate. "I'll take Anderson," I said. Kyle stopped. He looked at me, a patronizing smile twitching at the corner of his mouth. "He's a heavy lifter. He needs someone who can spot him on max effort days. No offense, but he's used to a certain intensity. He's used to a torn rotator cuff waiting to happen," I corrected. I watched Marcus load Anderson's bar for a year. His elbows flare, his bar path is a mess, and he's relying purely on momentum. If he keeps lifting like that, he's going to snap a tendon before he hits 250, let alone 300. Kyle opened his mouth to argue, but I didn't let him. "I'll take Anderson. I'll take the 2 real estate guys. Give Jess the morning boot camp Marcus used to run." I looked around the room. I felt a cold, calm authority settling into my chest. Marcus is gone. His methods walked out the door with him. We are going to stop injuring clients for the sake of their egos, and we are going to start training them like actual athletes. Kyle swallowed hard. He looked at the empty space on the counter, where Marcus used to leave his gallon jug of blue pre-workout. He looked back at me. He nodded. Taking over Marcus's clients was like trying to deprogram members of a cult. My first session with Anderson was a nightmare. He was a 50-year-old guy with a red face, a massive chest, and 0 mobility. He walked onto the floor, expecting me to slap him on the back, hand him smelling salts, and tell him to go to war with a barbell. Instead, I handed him a PVC pipe. "What is this?" he asked, gripping the lightweight plastic. "We are fixing your shoulder mobility," I said, pointing to a patch of empty turf. "Give me 10 pass-throughs." He laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. Marcus had me pressing 120 dumbbells on day 1. "I don't pay for stretching." I didn't smile. I just looked at him, perfectly still. "Marcus isn't here. I am. And if you want to press anything heavier than your own ego without needing surgery in 6 months, you are going to do exactly what I tell you." He glared at me. I held the eye contact. I had faced down a man twice his size who drank my breast milk. A middle-aged car salesman throwing a tantrum over a PVC pipe was nothing. Anderson gripped the pipe and started the movement. Within 3 weeks, his shoulder pain disappeared. Within 2 months, his bench press numbers actually started climbing because he finally had the mechanical stability to support the weight. He stopped asking where Marcus was. He started calling me Coach. The shift at Iron Apex wasn't instantaneous, but it was permanent. Without the toxic anchor of Marcus's alpha culture pulling everyone down, the gym modernized. I stopped hiding my motherhood. I didn't apologize for my pumping schedule. The old massage therapy room became my sanctuary. Dave bought a small mini fridge for the room, so I didn't even have to use the communal kitchen anymore. I hung a whiteboard on the door. When I was in there, I wrote "Do not enter," pumping in thick black marker. Nobody knocked, nobody complained. The front desk girls defended that door like armed guards. My son turned 1. We threw a small party in our backyard. Dave made brisket. I had a beer. I looked at my baby, pulling himself up on the edge of the picnic table, his thick little legs strong and steady, and I realized I had survived the hardest physical and mental year of my life. I hadn't just survived it, I had conquered it. 6 months after that, Kyle quit to take a corporate job at a big box gym chain. The owner of Iron Apex, an absentee investor who lived 2 states away, called me on a Tuesday afternoon. He had looked at the retention numbers. He had looked at the injury reports, which had dropped to 0. He offered me the head trainer position. I didn't thank him. I negotiated a 30% pay bump, a continuing education stipend for my staff, and full authority over hiring and firing. He agreed to all of it. I never heard from Marcus directly again. In the fitness industry, guys like him don't disappear entirely. They just migrate. They move to different zip codes, find new gyms with desperate managers, and start the cycle over. But I did see him one more time. It was mid-July, almost 2 years after the incident in the break room. I was at a massive regional powerlifting meet, coaching Jess through her first official competition. The venue was a converted warehouse, hot and suffocating, smelling of chalk dust, cheap ammonia, and nervous sweat. The bass from the speakers was rattling the metal folding chairs. Jess had just crushed a personal record on her squat. We were standing by the warm-up racks, high-fiving and shaking out her legs. I turned around to grab her water bottle from my duffel bag, and there he was. He was standing about 30 feet away, leaning against a concrete pillar near the vendor tables. He was wearing a tight black t-shirt that barely contained his shoulders, holding a clipboard. He was working the event, likely judging or spotting for one of the lower-tier flights. He looked exactly the same, but entirely different. The sheer mass was still there, but the aura was gone. He just looked like a tired guy in his late 40s holding a piece of plastic. He scanned the crowd, and his eyes locked onto mine. The loud, chaotic noise of the warehouse seemed to drop away for a split second. I stood up straight. I didn't break eye contact. I didn't scowl, and I didn't smile. I just looked at him with the calm, absolute certainty of someone who holds all the cards. He stopped chewing his gum. His grip tightened on the clipboard. The color drained from his face. A perfect, delayed echo of that day in the staff kitchen. The memory of what he had swallowed, the profound, sickening humiliation of it, flashed across his features as clearly as a neon sign. He didn't nod. He didn't wave. He turned his head away, stared very hard at the floor, and quickly walked in the opposite direction, disappearing into the crowd of heavy lifters and chalk dust. I zipped up my duffel bag, handed Jess her water, and turned my attention back to my lifter. I had work to do. Seeing Marcus at that meet was the last ghost I needed to exercise. It proved something fundamental to me. The guys who yell the loudest about being apex predators are almost always the ones most terrified of the dark. When you strip away the heavy lighting, the anabolic steroids, and the captive audience of a gym floor, they are just deeply insecure men holding clipboards in stuffy warehouses. He didn't have any real power. He only had the power we collectively agreed to give him. And the second I stopped agreeing, he ceased to exist in my world. I took that realization back to Iron Apex, and I went to work. By my 3rd year as head trainer, the gym was completely transformed. The absentee owner, a guy named Gable, who lived in Ohio and only cared about the profit and loss spreadsheets, started calling me less and less. He trusted me. Revenue was up 40%. Member retention was at an all-time high. We had a waitlist for one-on-one coaching, but I was tired of building equity for someone else. Dave and I sat down at our kitchen table one Sunday night, spread out 3 years of financial documents, and ran the numbers. We remortgaged our house. We cashed out Dave's stock options. We went to the bank and secured a massive small business loan. In October, I called Gable and made an aggressive, cash-heavy offer to buy the business outright. He accepted it in less than 24 hours. The day the ink dried on the closing documents, I didn't celebrate with champagne. I celebrated with a sledgehammer. I waited until the gym closed at 10 p.m. I brought Dave, Tyler, and Jess in. We rented a massive industrial dumpster and parked it directly in front of the double glass doors. The first thing to go was the break room. We hauled that cracked, stinking leather sofa, the exact spot where Marcus used to lounge and critique our bodies, out the back door, and hurled it into the metal bin. We ripped out the old, buzzing refrigerator. We tore down the peeling laminate cabinets. Then, I walked down the hall to the men's locker room. I stood in front of the utility closet. The mop sink was still there. The faint, ghostly smell of bleach and damp cotton still lingered in the air. I swung the sledgehammer directly into the drywall. It felt incredible. The white dust plumed into the air. I hit it again and again, breaking through the cheap wooden studs, tearing down the physical space where I had been forced to hide, where I had been made to feel like my motherhood was a shameful, dirty secret that needed to be contained next to the toilet paper reserves. We knocked the entire wall down, expanding the footprint of the locker room and permanently erasing the closet from the floor plan. We rebuilt the gym in our own image. We installed brand new, commercial-grade lifting platforms. We bought specialized turf for sprint work. We completely remodeled the break room with an industrial espresso machine, a massive, double-door stainless steel refrigerator, and a heavy oak table where the staff could actually sit and eat together like human beings. Jess became my floor manager. Tyler took over youth athletic conditioning. We hired 4 new trainers, 3 of them women. My son is 4 years old now. His name is Leo. On Saturday mornings, when Dave is running errands, Leo comes to work with me. He is a loud, fast, incredibly sturdy little boy. He knows every corner of Iron Apex. He knows not to walk behind the lifting platforms. He knows how to fist bump the front desk staff. Sometimes, when the gym is quiet, I let him push the empty lightweight sled across the green turf. I watch his little legs drive against the carpet, his face scrunched up in pure, unadulterated effort, and I feel a profound sense of peace. He is growing up in a space entirely dedicated to strength, but it is a different kind of strength. It's not the brittle, performative dominance that Marcus demanded. It's functional. It's supportive. It's the kind of strength that builds people up instead of breaking them down for spare parts. I am 34 years old. I own a highly profitable commercial facility. I can deadlift 300 pounds. I employ a dozen people who respect me not because I yell at them, but because I have their backs. The fitness industry will always have its toxic elements. There will always be guys who think they are owed the world just because they can pick up a heavy rock and put it back down again. There will always be people who view women as scenery and motherhood as a weakness, but they don't own the space anymore. Not here. Yesterday afternoon, I finished a heavy training session. I was exhausted, sweaty, and my hands were coated in white lifting chalk. I walked into the newly renovated break room. The afternoon sun was pouring through the windows, lighting up the clean countertops. I opened the double doors of the staff fridge. It was packed. There were glass Tupperware containers full of chicken and rice, stacked neatly. There were protein shakes, energy drinks, and paper bags holding deli sandwiches. Right in the middle, sitting completely undisturbed, was my meal prep: a grilled chicken salad and an expensive cold-pressed green juice. It wasn't hidden. It didn't have my name written on it in thick black Sharpie. It was just sitting there, safe in the open. I grabbed the green juice, twisted the cap off, and took a long, cold drink. Nobody takes my food anymore. The alpha tax is dead. The apex predator is just the woman standing in the kitchen, owning the building, drinking exactly what belongs to her. The thing about building a healthy ecosystem is that you have to aggressively defend the borders. Toxicity doesn't just disappear because you painted the walls and bought new equipment. It always tries to creep back in, usually wearing expensive gym clothes and carrying a false sense of entitlement. We hired a new trainer in the spring named Maya. Maya was 22, fresh out of a university kinesiology program, and incredibly smart. She knew biomechanics better than trainers who had been in the industry for a decade, but she was young, she was small, and she hadn't yet developed the thick, calloused skin you need to survive the gym floor. In May, a guy named Vance walked in to sign up for premium one-on-one coaching. Vance was a regional director for a logistics company. He was in his late 30s, drove a matte black Audi, and wore a heavy gold watch while he lifted. He specifically requested a female trainer. He said he wanted someone with a softer touch who wouldn't just yell at him like a drill sergeant. I assigned him to Maya. It took exactly 2 weeks for the red flags to start popping up. I was working at the front desk computer, updating payroll, when I saw them out on the turf. Maya was trying to coach Vance through a set of kettlebell swings. She was demonstrating the hip hinge, her cues crisp and professional. Vance wasn't looking at the kettlebell, he was looking at her chest. When it was his turn, he completely ignored her form instructions, rounded his back, and muscled the weight up with his shoulders. When Maya gently tried to correct him, stepping in to adjust his stance, he laughed. He reached out, patted her on the top of the head like a golden retriever, and said, "Don't worry about it, sweetheart. I know my limits. Just count the reps." Maya froze. Her shoulders dropped. I watched the absolute crushing weight of that single microaggression shut her down. For the rest of the session, she just stood quietly holding her clipboard, her voice barely a whisper, counting his reps while he did whatever he wanted. It was like watching a ghost. I saw myself years ago shrinking under Marcus's shadow. I saw the front desk girls crying over their stolen lunches. I saw every woman who had ever been made to feel like she was just an accessory in a male-dominated space. 10 minutes after Vance left, Maya knocked on my office door. She looked exhausted. She sat down in the chair across from my desk, the exact chair I used to sit in when I was begging Kyle for a place to pump. She looked at her hands. "I think I need to transfer Vance to Tyler's roster," she said quietly. "Why?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "We just don't click," she lied. "He's a heavy lifter. He needs more aggressive pacing. I don't think I'm the right fit." I didn't let her off the hook. "Did he touch you today, Maya?" Her head snapped up. Her eyes went wide. "He just patted my head. It wasn't a big deal. He's just old school. He's a premium client. I don't want to lose the revenue for the gym. Maya," I interrupted, my voice very calm. "Stop." She stopped talking. Her eyes were welling up with tears of sheer frustration. The frustration of knowing exactly what your job is, being entirely qualified to do it, and being treated like a child anyway. "He called you sweetheart, ignored your programming, and physically patronized you," I said. "Is that accurate?" She nodded, staring at her lap. "Yes." I stood up from my desk. I didn't feel the panicked, suffocating helplessness I used to feel when I was sleep-deprived and hiding in closets. I didn't need to plot a complex psychological trap. I didn't need to use my breast milk to teach someone a lesson in the dark. I had something better now. I had the deed to the building. "Come with me," I said. Vance came in for his next session on Thursday at 5 p.m. The gym was packed. The heavy metal was playing. The barbells were clanking. The energy was high. Maya was waiting for him by the front desk. She looked nervous, clutching her tablet tightly against her chest. Vance strolled through the double glass doors. He scanned his fob, dropped his gym bag on the floor, and looked at Maya with that same slow, entitled smirk Marcus used to wear. "Ready to crush it today, kiddo?" he asked, clapping his hands together. I stepped out from behind the front desk. I walked directly into his physical space, cutting off his line of sight to Maya entirely. "Vance," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the noise of the lobby. He looked down at me, surprised. "Hey, boss lady, what's up?" "I've reviewed your account," I said, keeping my hands resting loosely at my sides. "We're canceling your membership, effective immediately." The smirk vanished, his heavy brow furrowed. "Excuse me? What are you talking about? I just paid for a block of 20 sessions." "I know," I said. I pulled a white paper receipt from my pocket and held it out to him. "And I just refunded every single one of them to your American Express. The prorated amount for your monthly access fee has also been returned. You have 0 remaining balance with Iron Apex." He didn't take the receipt. He looked around the lobby. A few of the regulars had stopped checking in. People were watching. The humiliation was starting to bloom red on his neck. "Are you out of your mind?" he demanded, his voice rising. "I'm a premium client. I drop $1,000 a month here. You can't just cancel my membership. I own the facility, Vance. I can do whatever I want," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't waver. It was dead flat. "You don't listen to your coach. You don't respect the staff. And you touch my trainers without their permission. That doesn't fly here." I patted her on the head, he barked, pointing a thick finger at Maya, who was standing tall behind me. "It was a joke. You people are too damn sensitive. And you are trespassing," I said. I took one step closer to him. I didn't blink. "Pick up your bag and leave." He stood there for 5 seconds, vibrating with rage. He looked like he wanted to scream, to break something, to assert his dominance. He puffed out his chest, trying to use his sheer physical mass to intimidate me. But I had stared down a monster twice his size when I had absolutely nothing. Staring down a middle manager in a clean, well-lit lobby I owned was effortless. He saw the completely dead, unyielding look in my eyes. He saw the shift in the room as Tyler and 2 of the heavy lifters naturally drifted toward the front desk, forming a quiet, imposing wall behind me. He snatched his gym bag off the rubber matting. "This place is a joke," he muttered, his voice shaking. He shoved the glass door open, not bothering to look back. "Good luck staying in business." The door swung shut. The lobby was quiet for a second, save for the steady thump of the music. I crumpled the voided receipt and tossed it into the trash can behind the desk. I turned around and looked at Maya. She was staring at me, her mouth slightly open. "Your 5 p.m. slot is open," I told her, my voice returning to its normal, conversational tone. "Go grab a coffee from the break room, get some charting done. You still get paid for the hour." She blinked, processing what had just happened. Then, a massive, brilliant smile broke across her face. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. She just nodded, turned around, and walked toward the staff area with her head held high. I watched her go. That is the difference between survival and leadership. Survival is poisoning the well so the predator gets sick. Leadership is standing at the gate and never letting the predator inside in the first place. I went back behind the desk, pulled up the payroll spreadsheet, and got back to work. By year 5, 2.5, Iron Apex wasn't just a gym, it was a fortress. We paid off the small business loan 3 years ahead of schedule. We didn't do it by locking people into predatory, unbreakable contracts or charging hidden annual maintenance fees. We did it entirely through retention. When people feel safe in a space, when they feel seen and respected, they don't leave. They bring their friends, they bring their spouses, they bring their kids to Tyler's youth conditioning camps. The local high school football coach started sending his offensive line to us in the off-season. He told me, completely unprompted, that he sent them to Iron Apex because I was the only facility in a 50-mile radius that actually taught teenage boys how to respect a shared space, instead of just screaming at them to lift heavier. I was 36. I had a slight silver streak coming in at my left temple, a permanent callus across the base of my fingers from the barbell knurling, and a profound sense of ownership over my life. Then Kyle came back. It was a rainy Tuesday morning in March. I was out on the main floor, spotting Sarah, the same Sarah who had been doing Bulgarian split squats the day Marcus drank my milk. Sarah was now 42, strong as hell, and getting ready to test her 1 rep max on the deadlift. The heavy glass doors of the lobby swung open, letting in a gust of damp wind. I looked over from the lifting platform. 2 men walked in. One was wearing a sharp, tailored navy suit. The other was Kyle. He looked different. The nervous, sweaty energy of a middle manager terrified of his own staff was gone. He was wearing a sleek branded quarter zip sweater, expensive leather loafers, and an Apple Watch. He had leaned out, probably from stress and corporate fasting protocols, and he walked with the manufactured, practiced confidence of a guy who just spent a week at a corporate synergy retreat. He was the regional director of acquisitions for Titan Edge, the massive, publicly traded big box chain that had been aggressively buying up independent gyms across the state. I didn't stop my session. Lock the lats, Sarah, I said, keeping my eyes on her form. Drive the floor away. Up. Sarah pulled the weight. The barbell bent slightly under the tension. She locked it out perfectly at the top, held it for a second, and controlled the descent back to the rubber mats. Beautiful, I said. Take 3 minutes. I grabbed my towel, wiped the chalk off my hands, and walked over to the lobby. Kyle was standing by the front desk, looking around. He was taking in the espresso machine, the heavy oak table in the break room, the clean, open layout of the turf. He didn't look impressed. He looked like he was calculating demolition costs. Long time, Kyle said, extending a hand as I approached. I didn't take it. I just looked at him, then at the guy in the suit, who was holding a thick leather portfolio. What do you want, Kyle? I asked. He dropped his hand, a tight professional smile stretching across his face. Straight to the point. I like that. We've been watching your numbers. You've done a nice little job here. Really turned the place around. A nice little job. It was the exact same patronizing tone he used to use when he told me I had to pump in the mop closet. I'm busy, Kyle. If you're here to buy a day pass, it's $20. If not, the door is right behind you. We're here to make you an offer, the suit said, stepping forward. He had a smooth, frictionless voice. Titan Edge is expanding our footprint in this zip code. We want this location. We want the square footage. Kyle crossed his arms, leaning against the counter. We know what you paid Gable for the place. We're prepared to offer you double. Cash out, $2.5 million. You hand over the keys, we rebrand the facility, swap out the equipment, and you get to go home and be a full-time mom. He said it like he was handing me a winning lottery ticket. He genuinely believed he was offering me the ultimate prize, the chance to stop working, the chance to be absorbed by the machine and disappear. I looked at the portfolio in the suit's hand. I knew exactly what a Titan Edge gym looked like. I had seen them. They were brightly lit, sterile warehouses packed shoulder to shoulder with rows of identical cardio machines with built-in televisions. They played top 40 pop music at a low, inoffensive volume. They hired trainers fresh out of weekend certification courses and paid them minimum wage to sell supplements to elderly people. If I sold to them, they would fire Maya. They would fire Jess. They would rip out the heavy lifting platforms and replace them with massage chairs. They would destroy the ecosystem I had spent 5 years bleeding for, and they would do it in a weekend. 2.5, I repeated. It's life-changing money, Kyle urged, dropping his voice to sound conspiratorial, like we were old friends. Take the win. Because honestly, if you say no, we're just going to sign the lease on that empty big box retail space 2 blocks down. We'll undercut your membership prices by 60%. We'll run a 6-month zero enrollment promotion, and we will bleed your client base dry. You can't compete with our marketing budget. You'll be underwater in a year. It was a threat wrapped in corporate jargon. It was the exact same bully tactic Marcus used to use, just wearing a quarter zip sweater instead of a stringer tank top. I looked at Kyle. I really looked at him. I saw the slight tremor in his hands. I saw the dark circles under his eyes that the expensive moisturizer couldn't hide. He was a middleman. He was a guy whose entire livelihood depended on convincing people that the machine was inevitable. I turned around and looked at my gym. I saw Tyler demonstrating a box jump to a group of laughing high school kids. I saw Jess sitting at the heavy oak table, sharing her lunch with Maya while they went over charting. I saw Sarah, a 42-year-old mother of 3, strapping on a leather lifting belt to pull 250 pounds off the floor. I turned back to Kyle. Open your gym, I said. Kyle blinked. His professional smile faltered. What? Sign the lease down the street, I told him, keeping my voice completely level. Paint the walls, buy the treadmills, run your ads, undercut my prices. The guy in the suit frowned, opening his portfolio. I don't think you understand the market mechanics here. We have the capital to. I understand the mechanics perfectly, I interrupted, staring directly into Kyle's eyes. You sell access to equipment. I sell a culture. Your entire business model relies on people signing up for $20 memberships and never actually showing up to use them. You want a gym full of ghosts. I took a step closer to the counter, invading his personal space just enough to make him shift his weight backward. My clients don't come here because it's cheap, I said. They come here because when they walk through that door, nobody touches them without permission. Nobody steals their food. Nobody treats them like meat, and nobody treats them like a quota. They know my name, they know my kid's name, and they know I will throw anyone out of this building who makes them feel small. I gestured to the floor behind me. You think you can steal my people with a zero enrollment fee? Try it. Open your sterile fluorescent box. The people who want to pay $20 to walk on a treadmill while watching cable news will go to you. I don't want them anyway. The people who want to actually become physically and mentally bulletproof will stay exactly where they are. Kyle stared at me. The smugness had completely evaporated, replaced by a tight, rigid frustration. He looked like a man who had brought a spreadsheet to a gunfight. You're making a massive mistake, Kyle said, his voice dropping the friendly pretense entirely. It was cold now. You're just a local owner. You can't fight a corporation. I survived Marcus when I was running on 2 hours of sleep and pumping in a mop closet, I said. You think a corporate marketing budget scares me? You're just a bully with a dental plan, Kyle, and I break bullies for a living. I didn't wait for him to respond. I didn't wait for the suit to close his leather portfolio. The day pass is $20, I repeated. Otherwise, get out of my lobby. Kyle looked at me for a long, heavy second. He realized, finally and completely, that there was no angle to play. There was no psychological leverage. I wasn't the exhausted, desperate girl he used to manage. I was concrete. He turned sharply on his heel and pushed through the glass doors. The suit followed right behind him, the heavy door swinging shut and cutting off the sound of the rain. I watched the black SUV pull out of the parking lot and merge onto the wet street, disappearing into the gray morning traffic. I walked back to the lifting platform. Sarah was chalking her hands, looking at me with a question in her eyes. Everything okay, coach? She asked. Everything is perfect, I said, stepping up to the edge of the rubber mat. Let's pull some heavy iron. Kyle wasn't bluffing. 4 months later, right in the middle of a brutal, sweltering August, Titan Edge opened its doors 2 blocks down the street. They took over a massive, gutted commercial husk that used to be a Sears. They didn't just open, they invaded. They put up a 50-foot glowing neon sign that bled blue light into the intersection all night. They hired college kids to put glossy flyers under the windshield wipers of every car parked within a 5-mile radius. $10 a month, 0 enrollment fee, free hydro massage on your first visit. I watched it happen from the front windows of Iron Apex. At first, I told myself we were completely insulated. I believed the speech I gave Kyle in the lobby. I believed that culture would effortlessly trump convenience. But business is brutal, and inflation is real. When milk is $5 a gallon and gas is pushing 4, loyalty gets expensive. By September, we started seeing the cancellations. It wasn't a mass exodus, but it was a steady, agonizing drip. 3 members on a Tuesday, 2 more on a Friday. Usually, it was the fringe members, the ones who came twice a week just to use the ellipticals and never really talked to anyone. But then, a few of our regulars left. A guy named Greg, a 55-year-old accountant who had been with us for 2 years, walked up to the front desk looking incredibly guilty. He couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the jar of complimentary protein mints and mumbled something about his kids starting college and needing to tighten his belt. He was saving $80 a month by switching to Titan Edge. I didn't argue. I didn't try to guilt him. I processed his cancellation, shook his hand, and wished him the best. But it hurt. When you build a business out of your own blood, sleep deprivation, and sheer force of will, every lost member feels like a physical rejection. Dave and I spent a lot of late nights at the kitchen table that fall. The spreadsheets were spread out over the wood, illuminated by the harsh overhead light. Dave was running projections, tapping his pencil against his coffee mug. If we lose another 5% of the base, we dip into the red for the quarter. Dave said quietly, looking at the screen. We have the cash reserves to weather it, but we can't bleed out forever. We might have to cut the continuing education stipend for the trainers. And I looked at the numbers. I thought about Maya, who is currently taking a specialized course in postpartum pelvic floor rehab on the gym's dime. I thought about Jess, who was studying for her elite powerlifting certification. No, I said, we don't cut the stipends. We don't cut their pay. We don't change the product. Then we have to run a promo. Dave argued gently. We have to do something to compete. If we drop our prices to compete with a corporate warehouse, we cheapen what we do. I said, my voice hardening. We turn into them. We survive this by being exactly what they aren't. I went in the next morning and called a staff meeting. I didn't hide the numbers. I laid it out exactly as it was. I told them we were taking a hit. I saw the flash of worry in Maya's eyes, the tight set of Tyler's jaw. We are not changing our structure, I told them, leaning against the heavy oak table in the break room. We are not running discounts. We are not pushing supplements to make up the margin. We do one thing, and we do it better than anyone else in this city. We coach, we protect, we build. I looked around the room at my team. Titan Edge is a rental facility. Iron Apex is a team. Over the next 6 months, I don't want you focusing on the people who left. I want you hyper-focused on the people who are still here. Learn their kids' names, track their sleep, fix their form, over-deliver on every single session. They nodded. The worry vanished, replaced by a quiet, determined focus. We went to war. Winter hit hard that year. By January, the neon sign down the street was still glowing, but the parking lot at Titan Edge was starting to look a little sparse. The reality of a $10 gym membership is that it relies entirely on apathy. But for the people who actually want to train, the illusion fades fast. We heard the stories trickling back through the grapevine. Titan Edge had only 2 squat racks for a facility of 3,000 members. There was a strict 30-minute time limit on the platforms, enforced by a loud, buzzing alarm system. The trainers weren't allowed to physically spot you because of corporate liability insurance. They just stood there with iPads and verbally encouraged you while you got crushed under a barbell. The locker rooms were a disaster. The weights were never re-racked. It was a sterile, chaotic free-for-all. It was exactly what Marcus would have loved. A place where the biggest, loudest guys could dominate the limited free weights while everyone else was relegated to the treadmill farm. The turning point happened on a freezing Tuesday night in February. I was at the front desk, wiping down the keyboards with a disinfectant wipe. The gym was humming. Tyler was running his youth athletes through a grueling sled circuit. The heavy metal was playing, mixed with the sound of laughter and clanking iron. The front doors opened. A blast of freezing air blew into the lobby, carrying a few stray snowflakes. Greg walked in. He looked miserable. He was wearing his heavy winter coat, his gym bag slung over his shoulder. He walked up to the front desk and stood there. He looked at the espresso machine. He looked at the clean, chalk-dusted turf, and he looked at me. The leg press over there has been broken for 3 weeks, Greg said, his voice quiet. And yesterday, a teenager dropped a 40-pound dumbbell on my foot because he was filming a TikTok video and wasn't looking. I tossed the disinfectant wipe into the trash. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just pulled up his old file on the computer. You still want the Monday, Wednesday, Friday evening block? I asked. Greg let out a long, heavy breath, dropping his gym bag onto the rubber mat. Yeah, I do. Full price. No complaints. Welcome back, Greg, I said. Tyler's about to open up a rack on the right side. Go warm up. He wasn't the only one. Over the next 2 months, the trickle reversed. The people who had left for the cheap thrill of a new, massive facility started filtering back. They walked through the double doors looking slightly embarrassed, ready to apologize, ready to admit that renting access to a machine is not the same as belonging to a gym. We didn't rub it in. We just handed them their fobs, welcomed them back, and put them to work. By our 6th anniversary, Titan Edge was still there, but it wasn't a threat anymore. It was just a filter. They caught the people who didn't really want to be there, and we kept the people who did. Our waitlist for one-on-one coaching grew to 3 months. We had to knock down another wall in the back office just to expand the physical therapy space Maya was running. I am almost 40 now. My son Leo is in 1st grade. He still comes to the gym on Saturday mornings. He sits at the heavy oak table in the break room, drinking a juice box and coloring in his math workbook while Dave spots me on my heavy sets. The gym is mine. It isn't just a business. It is a physical manifestation of everything I had to fight for. It is the antithesis of the dark, bleach-smelling mop closet where I used to sit and cry. Sometimes late at night after the final client has left and the doors are locked, I walk the floor. I turn off the overhead fluorescent lights, leaving just the soft, low glow of the security bulbs. The smell of the place is completely unique. It smells like chalk dust, rubber matting, cold steel, and stale coffee. It smells like effort. I look at the heavy squat racks, bolted securely into the concrete floor. I look at the pristine, untouched Tupperware containers sitting safely in the staff fridge. I look at the whiteboard in Maya's office, filled with the names of postpartum mothers she is helping to rebuild their core strength women who will never be told they just need to lose their baby weight. I think about Marcus sometimes, not with anger anymore, just with a cold, clinical understanding of what he represented. He represented the lazy, entitled assumption that the world belongs to the loudest, meanest guy in the room. He thought power was taking things that didn't belong to him. He thought he could steal a mother's food and pass it off as his own alpha tax. He was wrong. Power isn't taking. Power is building a fortress so strong, so deeply rooted in respect and reality, that guys like him can't even get past the front desk. I turn off the last security switch. The gym plunges into darkness, quiet and perfectly still. I walk out the back door, lock the heavy deadbolt, and walk to my car. The night air is cool and clear. I get in, start the engine, and drive home to my family, leaving the iron exactly where it belongs.